Okay, I'm back. I don't know whether you missed me or not. We had to go to the cabin.
Okay, there we go. Hello, everyone. This is the Fifth Oak Lord Relation Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, here with my wife, Reverend Ann Paul, and my group here. And we got some of our people back. So we're going to study tonight, paper 74, Adam and Eve, and that starts on page 828. And I think I actually got a clicker. Can you make a change? How about that? Good. All right, so let's say a little prayer and we will get started. Robbie, would you like to pray for us tonight?
Sure. Heavenly Father, we are very thankful for the opportunity that we have to come together to study this revelation, and especially paper 74, Adam and Eve. And we pray for insight to understanding this, that we may pass this information on to others. And we do this in your name, Father. Amen.
Amen. All right, paper 74. How about if I start reading today and we'll go around, all right? Paper 74, Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve arrived on Urantia from the year AD 1934, 37,848 years ago. It was in mid-season when the garden was in a height of bloom that they arrived. At high noon and unannounced, the two seraphic transports, accompanied by the Jerusalem personnel, entrusted with the transportation of the biologic uplifters to Urantia, settled slowly to the surface of the revolving planet in the vicinity of the temple of the Universal Father. All the work of rematerializing the bodies of Adam and Eve was carried on within the precincts of this newly created shrine. And from the time of their arrival, 10 days passed before they were recreated in dual human form for presentation as the world's new rulers. They regained consciousness simultaneously. The material sons and daughters always serve together, and it is the essence of their service at all times and in all places, never to be separated. They are designed to work in pairs. Seldom do they function alone. There's a bunch of stuff in this first paragraph, and I'd like to go over most of it if we can. First, when they arrived, 1934. So if you add from 1934 to now, that would be how many years? It would be 80-some years, right? So you'd have to add 80-some years to that 37,848. So it would be about 37,900 years, somewhere in that vicinity. 930. All right, when they actually arrived. And the reason they take it from 1934 is why?
It's when this paper was.
That's right. This is when the papers were revealed, right? It was in 1934. All right. They arrived in the two seraphic transports. Now, we know about the seraphic transports, right? They transport beings, their soul, in essence, and their personality, but not their material body, right? So when they got here, the first thing they have to do is supply a new material body. And it says here that they were in dual form. What are they talking about there? They were both human and within the system circuits of the planet, right? All the circuits of the planet, right? Even though we're in quarantine, the circuits are still there, right? All right.
Hey, Roger.
Yeah.
When you mention the circuits, is the circuits kind of like a battery that keeps them alive because they can connect up to it?
No, it's more or less there's 7 circuits of the local universe, and there's 4 circuits of of paradise, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit, right? So these are circuits that emulate from paradise itself to all creation. So these are, in essence, if you think about it, like a wiring diagram. They wire every being in the universe, and they're all interconnected. So when they talk about the cosmos and how we're part of a larger cosmos, in essence we are. We're all interconnected through these circuits. okay? And the circuit they're talking about here, the circuits they're talking about are the circuits of the local universe and the circuits of the super universe. And these circuits allows them extended life, but it allows them extended life only if they eat the tree of life while they're here. And what the tree of life, since it came from Adentia, it recharges their cellular system to keep them young indefinitely. Okay?
Correct.
So they don't ever grow old, as long as they're eating the tree of life. And we know from later on in the story, and studying this before, that they do eventually die. It takes them longer to die after they default, but they do eventually get to the point where they would die, right? Actually, they were removed from the planet before they actually died, but yeah, but they did die. So, okay. Well, that's not a correct statement. They weren't removed from the planet before they died. They were notified they would be removed upon death. They were resurrected shortly after they died. That's what happened. Okay. I want to make sure that's clear. I misstated that. I do that a lot. All right. So they regained consciousness 10 days after they arrived. So the seraphic transports landed. They transported their souls into the Father's temple, and from there they were given newly created bodies, right? We know from the previous papers that the Calagasta 100 were recreated by the Surgeons of Avalon, a close planet, right? So they came here from another planet and created those bodies. So the question is, did they do the same for Adam and Eve? Maybe so, you know. Or maybe it was the surgeons of Adentia that came down and created the material sons and daughters' bodies.
Hey Roger, when you say that the seraphim had their souls, they were already a material body, correct? When they were in seraphim, there was a body in that device.
No, they removed their souls and personality from their existing body, and that's how they were transported.
Do you know what that looks like?
No.
That would be nice.
Because when you mention the word soul, I always think of it as an experiential acquirement based on decisions. And then I think about the thought adjuster and the personality which the adjuster actually holds.
Right.
So I'm thinking the adjuster had to be in there, correct? But they're not indwelt with a mystery monitor, right?
They're not. Well, they're not. They leave that behind on Adentia. I mean,
But basically what you're saying is they've taken their soul and their identity or personality with them. Okay.
They take their
But we don't
souls-
have the details.
Yeah, and their personality with them in the Seraphim capsule, if you want.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And it's interesting they regain consciousness at the same time, and that's kind of neat. All right. It also says here that material sons and daughters serve together, so that normally they don't serve apart. Now they did give us an example when they talk about material sons and daughters, where in emergency situations, sometimes one material son or one material daughter can go on assignment by themselves. Because normally they work in pairs, and they very seldom work alone. All right.
And that would explain why Adam was so depressed and he pretty much chose rebellion because he couldn't be with Eve.
Well, he did not choose rebellion to him. He chose to default on his mission.
That's correct. That's
Yeah,
yeah.
big difference, because they were ruled by the Most High as not being contempt of the universe government, and that would
Right.
be considered rebellion. So they just defaulted on their mission. All right, so let's go on. Millie, would you take the next one?
Roger, I have a comment and a couple of questions.
Sure, go right ahead.
Number one, my comment, I know Tim asked about the circuits again, and I usually think of a circuit much like a microwave transmission. It's a direction of energy, like radio frequency.
Radio waves or any kind of line
And
frequency.
so
Yeah.
it looks like a microwave circuit between here and another planet,
Yeah.
and it branches out like a tree.
That's right. It does. And if you think about it, Rodney, it goes on, continues all the way to the end of the known universe, right?
Yeah, we're probably at the end of one of those branches.
Yeah, end of the line, as they say, right?
And then my question was, I think you may have answered it. Apparently, Adam and Eve have thought adjusters on their planet, but they leave them behind
Right,
when they come to a planet like ours.
right.
Because I know in order to gain a soul is between a thought adjuster and mind
Yeah,
creates the soul.
that's right. And we know that when they go back to their back to Jerusalem and go through the mansion worlds, they pick up their thought adjuster again. They merge with their thought adjuster once again. So it's just this temporary separation while they're on their mission.
And then one other thing here, I've got a note, I just want to make sure that this is correct. It's now been 450,000 years since the planetary prince was here,
Right.
and Adam and Eve arrived.
Right. 450,000 years from the time the planetary prince arrived till the time Adam and Eve arrived. That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Rodney, for those notes. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I do too. That's a long time.
Yeah, that is a long.
Yeah, that's a very long time.
Yeah. You know, and it's really funny. I was sitting at breakfast with some guys a couple days ago, and one of the guys stated that he says, you know, I just know Jesus is coming back before I die. I just know that he is.
Mm.
And I'm sitting there thinking, I didn't say this to him, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, you know, he's not got a concept of the time of the universe, because the time, 2,000 years ago when Jesus left this planet, that is such a short period of time. I don't think Jesus will return anytime soon, you know. He says he will return soon in the New Testament, but his soon is not what we consider soon. We got little bitty piddly lives that aren't even a blink of an eye. So to him, 100,000, 1,000,000 years is nothing, right? Because he thinks about universe time rather
Well, I
than.
think we dropped Bill.
Is that, oh, we did, yeah.
Yeah,
Hold
just-
on while we try to call her back.
You know, Jesus said that he would return, but he didn't say when.
He didn't say when. So that's what I was talking about when this guy says, well, I just know he's coming back in my lifetime. I think he's trying to push something. People get these perceived ideas and they don't take into account universe time and that sort of thing. It might be several million years before Jesus returns. He will return at some point, but we're not even close to being settled in light and life. So I think it'll be a while yet, you know. All right. Let's keep. Is Millie still back?
No, she's not back yet. It says hold on while we try to get the call back. Am I supposed to do anything?
No, just wait and see if you can get it. It'll either drop her. If it does, you can drag her back over.
Call dropped.
Okay. You know how to drag her back over to
This
the.
is not working. This way.
Okay, let's go on. Tim, would you take the next one?
Yes, number 1, Adam and Eve on Jerusalem. The planetary Adam and Eve on Urantia were members of the senior core of material suns on Jerusalem, being jointly number 14,311. They belong to the third physical series and were a little more than 8 feet in height.
That's where it tells you how tall they were.
Hey Roger, when they say the third physical series, what are they talking about?
Well, they're
Body
talking.
types?
They're talking about that on Jerusalem there were 3 separate series of Adam and Eve, so they were the third of the 3 series of being physical sons and daughters that had been created. So they were
Okay.
in that group of the third, as they say.
So they were 8 feet high, but that's on Jerusalem.
Yes, but that would be the case on on your rancho also, because we know that some of their descendants, along with the Nodites, were 8 feet in height, right? So, so they were pretty tall. They were overwhelming to the natives that were there.
Oh, it looks like she's on. Millie, are you there?
It does look like she's there.
It does. Your microphone seems to be working.
Okay, we'll give her a minute. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
Sure, Roger. At the time Adam was chosen to come to Rancho, he was employed with his mate in the trial and testing physical laboratories of Jerusalem. For more than 15,000 years, they have been directors of the division of experimental energy as applied to the modification of living forms. Long before this, they had been teachers in the citizenship schools for new arrivals in Jerusalem. And all this before in mind in connection with the narration of their subsequent conduct on New Rancho.
Now, what are they trying to tell us there, Rodney? They're trying to tell us that these were well-trained material sons and daughters, right? They were both scientists, physical laboratories, for trial and testing physical laboratories in division of experimental energy. So they worked with different energy forms, different types of beings and that sort of thing. And they also taught the citizenship schools on Jerusalem for new arrivals that came to Jerusalem. So these were material sons and daughters with great experience, right?
Well seasoned.
Well seasoned. And so their conduct after coming to is shocking, really, to the Salonia, the narrator of this.
So hey Roger, when they use the word energy, because it has a lot of meanings in the Urantia papers,
Yeah.
basically, but it's referred to here as material, mindful, and spiritual.
Yes. Yes, that's what they're talking about here.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Millie, are you there yet?
I think I'm here.
Okay.
Yes, you are. Good. Great.
You see where we're at?
When the proclamation.
Yeah, you want to take that paragraph?
When the proclamation was issued calling for volunteers for the mission of Adamic adventure on Urantia, the entire senior corps of material sons and daughters volunteered. The Melchizedek examiners, with the approval of Lanaforge and the Most High of Adentia, finally selected the Adam and Eve, who subsequently came to function as the biologic uplifters of Urantia.
Okay, so they put out this proclamation, and just about all the senior corps material sons and daughters wanted this job, right? Volunteer. And so the Melchizedek examiners and Lanaforge. Who is Lanaforge?
Our system sovereign.
Our system sovereign. That's right. And the Most Highs of Adentia. So that's the highest people you can get to make this decision, really. Okay, and Adam and Eve were selected as the biologic uplifters of Urantia. What are they talking about, biologic uplifters? Let's explain.
To upstep the human race.
To upstep the human race. So they were to have sons and daughters, which would number over 500,000, over 500,000, and then those sons and daughters would start mixing with the inhabitants of the planet to uplift their blood stock of the planet to make us more hardy, right? A more hardy stock. And that would have improved much of our many problems with diseases and things like that. All right?
You know what, Roger? For them to remark that entire senior corps volunteered, for them to have that remark must have been a little unusual.
Yeah, it must have been, but you know, this was a rebellion-based planet that they were going to, so it was probably unusual for a material son and daughter to be assigned to a rebellion-based planet. right? So the experience they would gain from this would be invaluable. It really would be.
And also in an experimental.
In an experimental world, that's right, Rodney.
So, hey, Roger, Adam and Eve would have children, and then those children would mingle with the outside tribes, and it would just take off?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Adam and Eve themselves were not supposed to mix with the tribes. They never were supposed to have children with the humans. Only Adam and Eve's children and grandchildren were to do this.
Correct.
Okay, so that's how they defaulted to the plan.
Well, rather than mingle, they actually married them. They actually were trained
Yeah.
how to live properly and how to evolve
Yeah,
well
yeah,
and live in marriage.
yeah. You know, if you watch Ancient Aliens or something like that, and they talk about around 37,000 to 40,000 years ago, there was a change in our DNA pattern. This is where that change came from. Okay.
You know, I hear a lot of Urantia people always say 38,000, 38,000.
Yeah.
Okay, man, just go with the paper.
Yeah, it's close enough. It's a few thousand years here or there. You know, I misquote dates all the time. You know, if you look at the old videos, I'm sure you'll catch me on a couple things here and there. You know, I don't worry about it too much. When you're talking about millions of years of our lives, yeah, a couple thousand years is not going to make any difference. You know.
I always like to get it down to Revelation.
Yeah. Oh,
So, Roger, before any intermingling was to be done, they first had to get 500,000 grandkids.
that's right. They should have had 500,000 children, Adam and Eve. And those first 500,000 would be doing what? They would intermarriage brothers and sisters and cousins and that sort of thing to increase the stock of the violet blood. That was their mission, to do that. Okay?
So in no shape or form were they to mingle with the tribes, and they just expected the tribes to pretty much die off and perish?
Yeah,
Okay.
until the point where they were ready to introduce the violet blood into the stock. Yeah. Because, all right, now think about this. Before Adam and Eve arrived, we just talked about this last week, but you weren't here, Tim, but
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yeah. But we just talked about the fact that the people that built the garden, most of them died before the arrival of Adam and Eve, because it took about 89 to 90 years to build the Garden of Eden. So most of the people that started on the Garden of Eden were dead before Adam and Eve ever arrived. It was their children that were alive, or their children's children that were alive in the garden when Adam and Eve arrived. So, you know, even though they were doing the work of this mission, they did not get a pass to live longer or anything like that. You know, that's just an unusual case. Who was the only person we know of that got a pass to live past his normal life? That would be
Is that
Amadon.
Van?
Huh?
Who?
Amadon.
I knew I was going to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. He was the
And
only-
Amadon was the human tribal man, right?
He was a human tribal man that gave his plasma for the creation of some of the Calagassa 100, right? And he was the assistant of Van. Him and Van were the ones that stayed alive during the rebellion 250,000 years earlier till the arrival of Adam and Eve.
So
Okay.
a quarter of a
You
million
say-
years.
Yeah.
When you say him and Van, it was Van and Amadon that stayed alive for 200,000 years?
Yeah. Right.
And I thought Amadon was a man.
He was a man, but when he gave his plasma, he was given the complement of the circuits
Okay,
in
right.
return. So as long as him and Van ate of the tree of life, which they were in possession of, as long as they ate of the tree, they would regenerate and stay alive until Adam and Eve arrived.
Wow, that's incredible, because if you really think about it, you know, the whole tree of life legend where man becoming immortal,
Yeah,
immortality, you know, Amadon could actually say, hey, that was me.
yeah, he really could. If you think about it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so let's keep moving. Diane, I think you're up here.
Adam and Eve had remained loyal to Michael during the Lucifer rebellion. Nevertheless, the pair were called before the system sovereign and his entire cabinet for examination and instruction. The details of Urantia affairs were fully presented. They were exhaustively instructed as to the plans to be pursued in accepting the responsibilities of rulership on such a strife-torn world. They were put under joint oaths of allegiance to the Most High's Evidentia and to Michael of Salvington, and they were duly advised to regard themselves as subject to the Urantia Corps of Melchizedek receivers until that governing body should see fit to relinquish rule on the world of their assignment.
So they were to be loyal to the 12 Melchizedek receivers until the Melchizedek receivers turned over the planet to them to rule. Right? Also, it's interesting that they were taken before Lana Forge and given instruction and examination, right? And the Most Highs, and they took oaths of allegiance to both the Most Highs and Michael before they took their position. So, this was during the Lucifer Rebellion, so they had to make sure that these two material sons and daughters would stay within the scope of their assignment, right? That's what they were trying to do.
Just a small note here, Roger, when I look up the workbooks,
Yeah,
it says Amadon, it says modified human associate of Van.
right. Yeah, he was the modified human. Why was he modified? Because he was given the complement of the serpents, right? That's why he lived so long. Okay.
So they pretty much blessed him with eternal life, correct?
That's right. Yeah. As long as he was needed on the planet. Now, when him and Van were ready to leave, he relinquished his life and was taken to Jerusalem.
And Van was a member of the corporeal staff, right? The Caligastian 100?
Yeah, he was a member of the staff. Yeah, he was one of the 100 that came from Jerusalem, right, as volunteers. Interesting point, too. Van gave up his adjuster when he left, right? So his adjuster was still waiting for him when he left this planet. After that long period of time, that 200,000 years, his adjuster was waiting for him on the mansion worlds, right? To rejoin.
So what you're saying, Roger, is he didn't have internet or he didn't have a cell phone?
He didn't have internet, he didn't have a cell phone, and he didn't have that father fragment within, but he stayed loyal anyway, right? That's the whole point, is Van stayed loyal through 200,000 years without an adjuster, right, to help lead him along in the spiritual life. So
There's actually a lake named after him, Lake Van.
Yeah, that's right. That's close to
Yeah, I
it.
saw it.
Yep. And by the way, Tim, in the slides from 2 weeks ago, I have some great pictures of the possible locations of the first and second garden. You need to look at those; they're real interesting. So, when you have
Yeah, it's incredible.
yeah. Okay. Did I just read this? Or?
I did, sure.
Okay. This Jerusalem pair left behind them on the capital Satania and elsewhere 100 offspring, 50 sons and 50 daughters, magnificent creatures who had escaped the pitfalls of progression and who were all in commission as faithful stewards of Universe Trust at the time of their parents' departure for Urantia. And they were all present in the beautiful temple of the material sons, attendant upon farewell exercises associated with the last ceremonies of the bestowal acceptance. These children accompanied their parents to the dematerialization headquarters of their order, and where the last to bid them farewell in divine speed as they fell asleep in the personality lapse of consciousness, which precedes the preparation for seraphic transport. The children spent some time together at the family rendezvous, rejoicing that their parents were soon to become the visible heads, in reality the sole rulers of planet 606 in the system of Satania. So Adam and Eve had 50 sons and 50 daughters on Jerusalem before they left. Okay, they were grown beings. And so they basically wished them farewell before they left to come to the planet, right? This was a great honor for them to take up, right? All right. Tim, would you take the next one?
And thus did Adam and Eve leave Jerusalem amidst the acclaim and well-wishing of its citizens. They went forth to their new responsibilities adequately equipped and fully instructed concerning every duty and danger to be encountered on Urantia.
There we go. Oops. Okay. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
Yes, to arrival of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve fell asleep on Jerusalem, but when they awakened in God's temple on Urantia, in the presence of the mighty throng assembled to welcome them, they were face to face with two beings whom they had heard much, Van and his faithful associate Amadon. These two heroes of the Caligastia succession were the first to welcome them in their new garden home.
Now remember, Amadon was the one that everyone on Jerusalem and Edisha would always ask when anybody said anything about Urantia, what about Amadon? Is he still faithful? You know,
Does he still stand loyal?
That's right. That's right. Okay, so they woke up among this throng of the local inhabitants of the planet, right, in the garden. This was their first meeting of Dan and Amadon. All right. Really, would you take the next one?
Yes. The tongue of Edom was an Adonic dialect and spoken by Amadon. Van and Amadon had markedly improved this language by creating a new alphabet of 24 letters, and they had hoped to see it become the tongue of Urantia, and the Adentia culture would spread throughout the world. Adam and Eve had fully mastered this human dialect before they departed from Jerusalem, so that the son of Amdon heard the exalted ruler of his world address him in his own tongue.
So they learned how to speak the Andonic language before they left Jerusalem, right?
That's
Okay.
great.
And what is the Andonic? This is not Amadon's language. What's the Andonic language? That is from the descendants of Andon and Fonta, right?
Well, those are descendants. He is a descendant of them, isn't he?
He is a descendant of them. That's why he spoke the Andonic dialect. Okay.
I go back a couple of paragraphs. It brings tears to my eyes when I think about Van, 2,000 years with no guidance.
You mean 200,000?
This just
200,000.
blows me away.
Yeah.
Hey Roger, is there any reference to the Adanic dialect that we could know anything about today, or is it just so ancient?
No, it's an ancient dialect that, other than knowing that it had 24 letters, we don't know much about it. And any of the dialects during that period of time, the Babylons, any of them could be a down mixing of that language. But we don't know which one. They don't mention to us which one it was. So, all these, when they talk about, I was trying to think of the one that Ancient Aliens always refers back to. It's losing me right now. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But any of these languages could have been a result of this 24 character language that Van and Amadon came up with. Right? So, kind of interesting.
And on that day there was great excitement and joy throughout Eden, as the runners went in great haste to the rendezvous of the carrier pigeons assembled from near and far, shouting, "Birds, let them carry the word that the promised Son has come." Hundreds of believer settlements had faithfully, year after year, kept up the supply of these home-reared pigeons for just such an occasion.
So they had homing pigeons that sent out even back then. How they
Communication.
Yep. Was no Verizon Wireless.
Hey Roger, they mentioned the promised son. That's
Yeah.
talking about the material sons and daughters?
Material sons and daughters, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
As the news of Adam's arrival spread abroad, thousands of the nearby tribesmen accepted the teachings of Ammon, while for months and months pilgrims continued to pour into Eden to welcome Adam and Eve and to do homage to their unseen Father. So here these material sons and daughters show up in this beautiful garden, and they have two beings with that welcome them that's been on the planet over 200,000 years, right? One of them's been on the planet 400,000 years, right? Well, both of them have. And so you can imagine what the tribes people thought. They thought all four of these beings were gods, you know? So basically they would pour into the Garden of Eden just to get a glimpse of Adam and Eve and Van and Abaddon, right? And so probably the legends that we hear about, in the Middle East about the 8-foot giants and the men of old and these 8-foot beings and that sort of thing were the results from this very thing, right? So everything has reason behind it if you think about it. Who's up? Huh? Tim.
As the news of Adam's arrival
Nope.
spread
Next.
the next one, yeah. Soon after their awakening, Adam and Eve were escorted to the formal reception on the great mound to the north of the temple. This natural hill had been enlarged and made ready for the installation of the world's new rulers. Here at noon, the Urantia Reception Committee welcomed the son and daughter of the system of Satania. Amadon was chairman of this committee, which consisted of 12 members embracing a representative of each of the 6 Sandic races. The acting chief of the Midwayers, Anna, how do you pronounce that, Anna? A loyal daughter and spokesman for the Nodites. Noah, the son of the architect and builder of the garden, an executive of his deceased father's plans, and the 2 resident life carriers.
Interesting that Noah is in there. This is not the Noah that built the ark.
Right, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, no.
And then they mentioned the Nodites. Would you explain who the Nodites were?
Yeah, the Nodites were the descendants of the rebellious Caligastia 100. Remember, Nod rebelled along with Caligastia, and they took when Dalmatia started to sink, was overrun and started to sink, they went north. So they went up to a land which they eventually called the land of Nod, and that's where they got the term Nodites. But the reason it was called Nod was the leader of the rebellious Caligastia 100 that took them up there. Now, as time went on, many of the descendants of Nod eventually started mixing with the Loyalists. Okay, so a lot of the Nodites, or many of them were 7 and 8 foot tall because of the descendants of Nod himself. And so their descendants started mixing with the loyal people that did not rebel. And so some of the people were the descendants of the rebellious ones, and some of them were descendants of the ones that were loyal.
Question, Roger, were most of the people of Nod followers of Nod who
Yes.
rebelled?
Yeah, when it first started out, yeah, Millie, they were.
So when they started mixing with the people who did not rebel, this was a good thing.
It was a good thing, but there were clashes like you wouldn't believe, probably, Millie, of philosophy and their attitude towards living, that sort of thing, because the loyalists would stay loyal to God the Father, right, the Heavenly Father, where the rebellious ones would be loyal to Caligastia, Lucifer, and Satan, right? So it caused all sorts of problems. There was constant tension between the two groups, even though they did intermingle and marry and things like that. probably much of the intermingling and marrying was because being descendants of both of them, of the 100, they were probably more alike than not, being physically larger, being 8 foot, 7, 8 foot tall, and having smarter minds and things like that. All these things would make them attracted to more people of their kind, but they did mix with the regular people, and that's what in the Old Testament talks about the men of Nod mixing with the daughters of men, because they took those daughters as wives and had children and stuff, right? Because they was considered gods, really.
Cain went to live in Nod. Was he particularly large?
Yes, he was, because he was a descendant of Adam and Eve, right? He was the son of Adam and Eve. So,
Was he rebellious, as Nod was?
not necessarily, but he would look for somebody that is more akin to him outside his family. Because when he slain Abel, it made him an outcast, right? So he would go look for someone more like himself, and having no tribe and having no tattoo or mark, then he was in danger constantly when he was away from his own people. So when he went to the land of Nod to try to find a wife, it was because those beings would be more like he was than not, right? So.
Hey Roger, could I read you 2 things out of the workbook?
Sure.
It just says Nod, member of the corporeal staff, head of the Commission on Industry and Trade, leader of the rebellious members of the corporeal staff of Prince Caligastia. Then here's one more, Nodites. It says descendants of the 60 rebellious members of the corporeal staff of Prince Caligastia and their 34 modified assistants.
That's
the
right.
8th race of Urantia. When they say the 44 modified, is that the loyalist?
No, that's the rebellion ones. That was the assistants that rebelled. But they
So the
did
60 are
get they did get the infusion of the circuit, just like Amadon did. The difference is none of them had the tree of life to keep them alive. Okay, so when they married and they had descendants, then their children did not receive the circuit like they did, because they were modified and it would only last that one generation. But if they married, if they had a child with one of the corporeal staff, one of the 60 rebellious ones, then their descendants would be large like they are. That's why they talk about the land of giants. That their children, their children's children, and that sort of thing would all be very large. They would take the same tendencies of their parents. So it would be many, many generations before the largeness would decrease back to normal, and they would look more like the normal people. It talks about giants all the way down to almost the time of Christ. So there's quite a bit of them around. All right.
Yeah, I just read.
Got anything else I wanted to say about this? Okay, here's another interesting point too. It talks about the chairman of the committee, and it talks about the acting chief of the midwayers, right? And then Anan, a loyal daughter spokesman for the Nodites. There's the Nodite connection. And Noah, the son and architect, or the builder of the garden and executive of his deceased father's plans. That's what we were talking about. All those that started on the garden had died before they arrived. So he was the son of the father that made up the plans of the garden, right? This is really interesting stuff. Okay. Rodney, I think you're next.
Okay, the next act was the delivery of the charge of planetary custody to Adam and Eve by the senior Melchizedek, chief of the council of planetary custody to Adam and Eve by the senior Melchizedek, chief of the council of receivership on Urantia. A material son and daughter took the oath of allegiance to the Most Highs of Melchizedek, and to Michael of Nebadon, and were proclaimed rulers of Urantia by them, who thereby relinquished the titular authority, which for over 150,000 years he had held by virtue of action of the Melchizedek receivers.
So 150,000 years earlier, the Melchizedek receiver gave him the authority to be titular ruler of the planet until Adam and Eve came. And so that was the case for 150,000 years, even though the Melchizedek receivers did not leave, right? So so this was the case until Adam and Eve came. And then what's interesting is they had to re-oath to the Most Highs of Melchizedek, right? That's our constellation headquarters. And Michael of Nebadon again when they got to the planet. So they had to re-oath as a being of this planet. You'd think they would have been loyal, wouldn't they? Okay. Millie, would you take the next one?
Yes. And Adam and Eve were invested with kingly robes on this occasion, the time of their formal induction into world rulership. Not all of the acts of Dalmatia had been lost to the world. Not all of the arts of Dalmatia had been lost to the world. Weaving was still practiced in the days of Eden.
Okay, weaving material. That's one of the things they told them to do.
Then was heard the archangel's proclamation, and the broadcast voice of Gabriel decreed the second judgment roll call of Urantia and the resurrection of the sleeping survivors of the second dispensation of grace and mercy on 606 of Satanium. The dispensation of the prince has passed. The age of Adam, the third planetary epoch, opens amidst scenes of simple grandeur, and the new rulers of Urantia start their reign under seemingly favorable conditions, notwithstanding the worldwide confusion occasioned by lack of the cooperation of their predecessor in authority on the planet.
Okay, so the voice of angel of Gabriel decreed the second judgment, roll call, right? Where the sleeping survivors were raised and taken to the mansion worlds, right? When was the first one? First
The
roll call.
planetary prince.
Planetary prince, that's correct. And why are there three dispensations instead of two? Because
Why have there been?
yeah, there had been three. There's three dispensations: one before the prince, one after the prince, and the third dispensation is the reign of Adam.
I didn't know about the one before.
The what?
Hey, Roger, what exactly is a dispensation? Is it a period of time?
It's a period of time between one epoch and another.
Correct.
There's one before the planetary prince.
There's one
Okay.
before the planetary prince because of the implantation of life. It's the time between the life carriers implant life on the planet, and that life evolves to be human. Okay, that's considered a dispensation.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Maybe I missed it while I was out looking for my pencil. Gabriel decreed the second judgment call, toll call of Urantia. Roll call. What was the first roll call?
The first roll call was the arrival of Caligastia. There was a roll call when Caligastia arrived of all sleeping survivors, because there were some survivors that believed in a power of God, or God the Father, or a power of a almighty force that controls them. And those were the sleeping survivors before Caligastia, before they were informed of God the Father. So because those that came before, like the Indians and people like that, believed Anamalantan taught the breath giver, okay, which is their concept of God the Father. Okay, so all these beings that believed in this and believed in survival of their own soul would have been in that very first roll call before Caligastia came. Then the second roll call would have been all those between Caligastia and the arrival of Adam. So,
Hey, Roger,
yeah,
if you want to read more about the sleeping survivors, it's paper 30, section 4.
right.
That's funny how that came out.
Yeah. All right, so that's the second judgment roll call. And you remember when we talked about the mansion worlds, how they're prepared to take in large, massive amounts of beings at one time? And that's what these roll calls are. They have hundreds of thousands and millions of beings that are arrive on the mansion world simultaneously.
The dispensation of the prince has passed. The age of Adam, this third planetary epoch, opens amidst scenes of simple grandeur. What the third planetary epoch? What is that?
The third planetary epoch was the epoch of Adam, right? What was the fourth planetary epoch?
Yeah, we're living in the fourth now.
Well, the fourth planetary epoch was the arrival of Jesus.
Jesus, yeah, we're the
Right.
fifth.
Right. So what you're saying, Roger, is we're following up to the fifth epoch of Revelation. The first one being Dalmatia, the second Adam and Eve, the third one Macaventa Melchizedek, the fourth Jesus of Nazareth, and then the fifth epoch of Revelation.
Right.
But
So-
when you mention a planetary dispensation, do they give us an ideal of how much time is involved?
It can be any time whatsoever. Because between Melchizedek, which is about 900 BC, between the time between Melchizedek and Jesus was only about 900 years, if I am correct. I can't
Right,
see.
because Melchizedek is 1980 BC and Jesus is
Yeah, 1900.
7 BC.
Right, so
Oh,
those are
okay.
short periods of time, right?
2,000 years.
About 2,000 years, around 2,000 years, that's right. Now, it's been around 2,000 years between the epoch of Jesus and the fifth epochal revelation. What's the fifth epoch of revelation?
This,
The Urantia book,
The Urantia book, that's right.
our
So-
Revelation.
So
That's
our
right.
revelation marks the opening of the fifth epoch, right?
so Roger, does that mean there's been a roll call?
Yeah, probably there was a roll call when they brought the book to us.
Around 1934.
About 1934, yeah. So they took up all the sleeping survivors at that time. We would not know that because we wouldn't hear the roll call. We're not ready to leave,
Yeah, of course.
you know. But all those that were sleeping on the planet, in other words, how are they sleeping on the planet? They're not sleeping in the ground. They're not going to be popping up from their graves, right? I don't want to give people the impression that all these pictures where people are coming out of their graves and they're leaving their cars and all this stuff.
So they're on the mansion worlds, waiting to be awakened.
No,
And do your
no, they're with their guardian seraphim.
Their
waiting-
soul.
Their soul, waiting to be awakened.
so the guardian seraphim possess their souls.
That's right. And when the roll call happens, the guardian seraphim immediately leave for what? The mansion world. And they all awaken on the mansion world at the same time. How do they do that? They have millions and millions of guardian seraphim show up on the mansion world at the same time with these soul trusts, and they have these bodies prepared for them. And so they just insert them into the bodies.
And these sleeping survivors are also people, human beings from other planets, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And why exactly are they referred to as sleeping survivors again?
Because they did not, in their own right, get to the third psychic circle during their life. If you develop your soul and your personality and your brain and mind and all that, where you start the third psychic circle, you automatically go to the mansion worlds directly. You don't have to sleep and wait. But if you do not do that, if you don't have concepts of religious thought, you don't have concepts of God the Father, you don't have concepts of the brotherhood of man,
You have to be spiritually developed.
You have to be spiritually developed, and if that's the case, if you reach the third psychic circle, then when you die, 3 days later, you awaken on the mansion world, right? But those who do not do that, that are survivors, that have survivor capability, will sleep with the guardian seraphim for thousands of years, and when they wake up on the mansion world, they have a concept that they just died, just that second. You know,
And like when they say the word psyche, meaning soul
Right.
circles.
soul circles, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Alright. Okay, so we went through the epics, planetary epics. We know that the mansion worlds, because of the Urantia book, were in the fifth epic, right? The fifth epical revelation. And this revelation may go on for 10,000 years. We don't know, right? Okay. That's the other reason I don't think that Jesus is going to show up tomorrow. He could. He does what he wants, you know. But like I said, his concept of time is different than our concept. So what does that mean for us? That means we need to concentrate on developing our spirituality on this world now. Not looking to the future, but doing it now. Living now, right? And that's the whole point of this. Every day is a spiritual adventure, and every day we should try to experience our spiritual life as we walk, right? Okay. Well, that's pretty good preaching, Roger. What you done? Yeah. All right, let's move on.
We should buy you a pulpit.
Yeah, really, I got one.
Yeah, Roger.
I bought him that one.
Just nobody will listen. Right? Okay. Who are we up? Who's up?
Diane just read.
I just read.
Okay, I'm up next then. 3. Actually, Tim, why don't you read? I'm almost hoarse from you.
Okay. 3. Adam and Eve learn about the planet. Now, after their formal installation, Adam and Eve became painfully aware of their planetary isolation. Silence was the familiar broadcast, and absent were all the circuits of an extraplanetary communication. Their Jerusalem fellows had gone to worlds running along smoothly with a well-established planetary prince and an experienced staff ready to receive them and competent to cooperate with them during their early experience on such worlds. But on Urantia, rebellion had changed everything. Here the planetary prince was very much present. And though sworn of most of his power to work evil, he was still able to make the task of Adam and Eve difficult and to some extent hazardous. It was a serious and disillusioned son and daughter of Jerusalem who walked that night through the garden under the shining of the full moon, discussing plans for the next day.
Okay, so they get on this planet. They don't have all the extra things that most of the planet, most of the material sons and daughters have when they go to a new planet, right? And then they have Caligasta to deal with. Who does Caligasta use to do his will and cause trouble?
Is it Dalagasti? Is it you?
Dalagasta and who else?
Midwayers.
The Midwayers.
The Midwayers, the rebellious.
The rebellious Midwayers. So Caligasta has all these rebellious Midwayers running around as demons and devils and that sort of thing, showing up at tribes and in fire, when they have campfires and stuff like that, making all sorts of mischief, right? Trying to make do everything they can to take the emphasis away from God the Father, right, in the plan of the planet. So, and this is what Adam and Eve arrived to, is all this going on. You
See,
know?
we have to be compassionate for them in many ways. I know
We do.
I have felt ill at ease about them defaulting, but they were under extreme,
Extreme pressure
Extreme
all the
pressure.
time, yeah. But they were warned about all this before they left. right?
Extreme duress.
Yes,
Extreme duress,
absolutely.
that's right. And remember, all these Midwayers were running around causing havoc right up to the time of the resurrection of Jesus, right? So up to that time, they were free to do pretty much anything they wanted to outside of possessing humans involuntarily.
And notice the word evil too. Remember how, you talked about that difference
Yeah,
between sin, iniquity, and evil?
yeah. Yeah, the work of evil, right? Showing his power to work evil. Okay. Ryder, would you take the next one, please?
Thus ended the first day of Adam and Eve on isolated Urantia, the confused planet of the Caligastian trail. And they walked and talked far into the night, their first night on Earth. And it was so lonely.
Because they had no outside communications, right? They didn't prepare themselves for the isolation. Really.
I can believe it was like that. Yeah.
I had no self.
Yep. Okay. Millie, thank you.
Adam's second day on Earth was spent in session with the planetary receivers and the advisory council. From the Melchizedeks and their associates, Adam and Eve learned more about the details of the Caligastia rebellion and the result of that upheaval upon the world's progress. And it was, on the whole, a disheartening story, the long recital of the mismanagement of the world's affairs. They learned all the facts regarding the utter collapse of the Caligastia scheme for accelerating the process of social evolution. They also arrived at a full realization of realization of the folly of the attempt to achieve planetary advancement independently of the divine plan of progression. And thus ended a sad but enlightening day. Their second on Urantia. What a bummer.
Yeah.
I want to go home.
They probably did too at that point.
Hey, Roger, they mentioned the planetary receivers.
Uh-huh.
What exactly is that? Is that a being or?
Melchizedek's.
Melchizedeks. The planetary receiver were the Melchizedeks. They were the 12 Melchizedeks that took charge of the planet when Caligastia rebelled.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
And this was just the second day. Good.
Yep. There's a lot
Take
to
me,
it.
take me away.
I think that's a pretty important sentence there, that they also arrived at a full realization of the folly while attempting to achieve planetary advancement independently of the divine plan of progression.
And that's what Caligastia was trying to do, right? He was trying to get them to intermix with the humans right away, okay? So that he could have his way. That's the way he wanted to do it, right? So, and that was not part of the divine plan. So that's, that was just another way that he wanted to insert his evil plan in the process of Adam and Eve. Because Adam and Eve could see him, right? Caligastia. Caligastia was invisible to all the beings, or all the people there. But Van and Amadon could see him, and Adam and Eve could see him, right? So I'm sure he showed up often and tried to go get them off course.
So Caligastia's plot was basically to cause rebellion on the planet?
Yes, anything he could do to cause rebellion on the planet.
Anything to do with sin, which would be rebellion, or
Yeah.
disloyalty to deity?
Right. They called it freedom.
It was anything he could do to promote Lucifer's ideas.
That's right. That's exactly right.
It
And,
wasn't
Right.
his idea, he was promoting Lucifer's ideas.
and I don't know if you remember, the Lucifer Manifesto was all about individual freedom, right?
Mhm, liberty, yeah.
Liberty, right. Right. Are you going to teach this?
Would that be comparable to like Mussolini or to Hitler. I
Yeah.
mean, it seems like the patterns are very similar.
Oh, yeah. You know, if you think about Hitler's plan, he was going to try to change the world according to what he wanted, not what the plan
The
was.
Brotherhood of Mankind.
Yeah. Right. When you put yourself in front of everybody else, it's that me syndrome over and over and over again.
The third day.
We go back to the brotherhood of man.
Yeah.
We are all the same.
Yeah.
We're not better than or worse than anybody else, and they're not worse than you. They're not better than you.
That's right.
It's all of us together.
Yeah.
Once we realize this, maybe this world will come together.
That's
California.
It's also realizing that everybody is a brother and sister
Yeah.
that you meet, not just related to race, creed, or religion, or culture.
That's right. That's right. That's right. We're all children of God, brothers and sisters under God. Whatever you call your God.
Whatever you call your God and whatever you call your religion, we're still brothers and sisters under God.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
The third day was devoted to an inspection of the garden. From the large passenger birds, the fandors, Adam and Eve looked down upon the vast stretches of the garden while being carried through the air over this, the most beautiful spot on earth. This day of inspection ended with an enormous banquet in honor of all who had labored to create this garden of Edenic beauty and grandeur. And again, late into the night of their third day, the son and his mate walked in the garden and talked about the immensity of their problems.
This is a great reference about the Fandors carrying Adam and Eve, different.
You know, it's amazing because in the Hindu culture, Krishna is seen on a big bird, which looks like a fandor,
Yeah.
and you know, Krishna's blue, so which just really signifies divinity.
Yeah.
But I always think of Adam, you know.
Yeah. Well, you can imagine what this 8-foot guy looked like with a violet hue around his head, because when he took his clothes off, he'd have a violet hue everywhere, right? And you can imagine what this looked like, this 8-foot guy with this violet hue around his head, flying around on this humongous bird, with his wife. And you remember the show Avatar? That's a great example. Yeah, great
I
example.
want to ride on those birds. I want one.
Well, they're extinct now, but that would have been nice. Wouldn't it?
I'm not sure they're extinct. I think they're still around.
And that was 37 something plus thousand years ago, correct, Roger? When
Yeah,
these birds were in existence.
yeah. This is 37. Yeah,
You know, I did research on big birds on Google.
yeah,
They showed one. It was a big blackbird, and they had the bones. It was huge.
yeah. Well, they said, I think in the book they give a reference somewhere, if I remember correctly, that they actually went extinct about 35,000 years ago. So,
Well, that's only because they can't find them.
yeah,
That doesn't mean they're extinct. I've seen major size owls. We're talking, 8-foot wingspans and whatnot, not 12-foot, but, pretty big owls.
yeah,
That they don't talk about big birds like that.
yeah. Are you up? Or?
I think you
All right, on the fourth day, Adam and Eve addressed the garden assembly. From the inaugural mount, they spoke to the people concerning their plans for the rehabilitation of the world and outlined the methods whereby they would seek to redeem the social culture of Urantia from the low levels to which it had fallen as the result of sin and rebellion. This was a great day, and it closed with a feast for the council of men and women who had been selected to assume responsibilities in the new administration of world affairs. Take note, women as well as men were in this group, and that was the first time such a thing had occurred on earth since the days of Dalmatia. It was an astounding innovation to behold Eve, a woman, sharing the honors and responsibilities of world affairs with a man, and thus ended the fourth day on earth. So women were elevated once again because the arrival of Eve and her example back into their proper place. Now this is like the second time that they tried to do this, right? All
I
right.
think it's interesting that they all celebrate with a feast.
Yeah. We do the same thing, right?
We still do that.
Yeah. That's right.
Okay. The fifth day was occupied with the organization of the temporary government, the administration which was to function until the Melchizedek's receivers should leave Urantia.
And the sixth day was devoted to an inspection of the numerous types of men and animals. Along the walls eastward in Eden, Adam and Eve were escorted all day, viewing the animal life of the planet and arriving at a better understanding as to what must be done to bring order out of the confusion of a world inhabited by such a variety of living creatures.
And Adam was well versed in how to do that. Wasn't he? And that was the sixth day.
It greatly surprised those who accompanied Adam
Wait,
on this
wait,
trip.
wait. I overwent it there. I missed one. Okay. 3, 7, 8. Okay.
It greatly surprised those who accompanied Adam on this trip to observe how fully he understood the nature and function of the thousands upon thousands of animals shown to him. The instant he glanced at an animal, he would indicate its nature and behavior. Adam could give names, description of the origin, nature, and function of all natural creatures
Material.
of all material creatures on sight. Those who conducted him on this tour of inspection did not know that the world's new ruler was one of the most expert
Anatomist.
anatomist
Yeah.
of all Titania, and Eve was equally proficient. Adam amazed his associates by describing hosts of living things too small to be seen by the human eye.
Because he was a scientist, he understood all these things, right?
When the sixth day of their sojourn on earth was over, Adam and Eve rested for the first time in their new home in the east of Eden. The first 6 days of the Urantia adventure had been very busy, and they looked forward with great pleasure to an entire day of freedom from all activities.
Okay, I need to mention something here. The legend of creation of 7 days came from these 7 days, okay? And because Adam did something on the first 6 days and then rested on the 7th, that's just the way he did it, that's where the legend of God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days and rested in the 7th. Okay. And probably Moses came up with that concept to try to teach the Bedouins these legends. But circumstances dictated otherwise. The experience of the day had passed in which Adam was so intellectually and so exhaustively discussed the animal life of Urantia together with his masterly inaugural address and his charming manner, had so won the hearts and overcome the intellects of the garden dwellers that they were not only wholeheartedly disposed to accept the newly arrived son and daughter of Jerusalem as rulers, but the majority were about ready to fall down and worship them as gods.
Well, he was.
Yeah. Okay. How many sections do we have in this? Millie, you got your book handy in front of you?
Yes, I have my book.
How many sections is in this? I can't remember.
There's 8.
There are 11 sections in this, and we are on page 5 of 11.
Okay. Thank you.
No, there are 8
Yeah,
sections.
right. There's 8.
8 sections?
There's 8
6.
sections.
Oh, I'm talking pages.
Yeah,
I was talking pages.
yeah. Okay. Let's
We
do,
are on page 6 of 11 pages.
I don't want to end in between a section, that's what I was.
If you got to Adam's administration, you'd be almost halfway.
Okay, let's go with 4 then. Who is up next?
You just read, then I'm up.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Section 4, the first upheaval. That night, the night following the 6th day, while Adam and Eve slumbered, strange things were transpiring in the vicinity of the Father's temple, in the central sector of Eden. There, under the rays of the mellow moon, hundreds of enthusiastic and excited men and women listened for hours to impassioned pleas of their leaders. They meant well, but they simply could not understand the simplicity of the fraternal and democratic manner of their new rulers. And long before daybreak, the new and temporary administrators of world affairs reached a virtually anonymous conclusion that Adam and his mate were altogether too modest and unassuming. They decided that divinity had descended to earth in bodily form, that Adam and Eve were in reality gods, or else so near such an estate as to be worthy of reverent worship.
Okay, now think about this. We're talking about Bedouins or simple people that never seen anything of technology or anything their whole lifetime. And they go to this garden and they're at the Father's temple and they see this seraphim land. Okay, they don't know what it is, they don't know what it's for, but they see this miraculous thing. To them it would be what? A flying saucer, right? It'd be like a flying saucer. They see it land in the vicinity of the Father's temple. They know that they brought something, okay? 10 days later, these 8-foot beings walk out of this temple that weren't there before, right? So what do these simple people think? They think these people are either aliens or what? Gods from another planet, right? So that's where we are. So the masses think that these beings are gods and they're just modest, so they decide they're going to start to worship these new arrived gods. It's the first time anything like this has ever happened on the planet, ever.
Hey, Brother Roger,
Yeah.
Adam and Eve come to new planets frequently, so I don't think this would be unusual.
No.
I think Adam and Eve would almost expect that to happen.
Almost on every planet, wouldn't they, Rodney?
I
Because
would think so.
the seraphim would be visible, right? When they started to visualize and come into a physical form, right? So just the landing of the seraphim in itself would be beyond human imagination. You know, the only thing I can think of is it would look like a UFO with bright lights on it. You know, I mean that's what it would look like to them. So that's where we are. So you have to understand where these beings are coming from. That's why they want to worship, right? And the fact they're 8 foot tall and they glow. You know.
And they fly on fenders.
No, yeah, they fly on fenders. Nobody else glows. You know, so.
So, hey, Roger, this was the first time that the Bedouins, the tribes, ever saw Adam and Eve.
Yes.
And they're coming out of the Father's temple, and they're 8 feet tall, and of course, you know, they're back in those days, were really short.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they look like giants, of course.
Yeah.
And then they just, hey, let's, you know, I get it, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's worship them. Okay. So that's where we are. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Okay.
Just one more, Roger. I don't understand if Adam and Eve had been present the entire time, did that family generation die off and then they never went out again? Or since this is the first time the Bedouins have ever seen them, how does that fall into line since they've been there in the garden since?
Oh, at least 90 years. They've been in the garden at least 90 years, and they've never seen anybody like that in the garden. Now, they saw Ban and Abaddon, which was...
Adam and Eve were in the garden. The other beings were not in the garden.
Right, that's right. That's
There was a big wall
Yeah,
between
Right.
the beings
Mhm.
and the garden.
right.
I see, right, because I remember that slide that Roger had, and there was a big wall around it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No, not around it. The Garden of Eden was on a peninsula.
Yeah, and the wall would just cut off the peninsula from the mainland. It wasn't all the way around the garden. You follow
There's
me?
water the rest of the way around.
There's water the rest of the way around it.
And there were two walls, and between the walls were
Yeah,
houses of different animals from the whole area.
that's right. That's right. Okay, so let's go on. Rodney, would you take the next one?
The amazing events of the first 6 days of Adam and Eve on earth were entirely too much for the unprepared minds of even the world's best men. Their heads were in a whirl. They were swept along with a proposal to bring the noble pair up to the Father's temple at high noon in order that everyone might bow down in respectful worship and prostrate themselves in humble submission. And the garden dwellers were really sincere in all of this.
Now, what are they talking about prostrating themselves? In other words, they would fall to the ground with their face in the ground, their hands on the ground, giving homage to Adam and Eve, right?
Kind of like how Muslims worship, correct?
That's exactly
Which
right.
was actually how Abraham and the majority of those people did, in fact, do
That's right.
prostrate themselves.
Yeah, they worshipped in that manner. That's what they were getting ready to do. Okay?
That's okay. That's what they want to do.
That's right.
Van protested. Amadon was absent, being in charge of the guard of honor which had remained behind with Adam and Eve overnight. But Van's protest was swept aside. He was told that he was likewise too modest, too unassuming, that he was not far from a God himself. Else how had he lived so long on earth, and how had he brought about such a great event as the event of Adam? And as the excited Edenites were about to seize him and carry him up to the mount for adoration, Van made his way out through the throng, and being able to communicate with the midwayers, sent their leaders in great haste to Adam.
Okay, so Van sent the midwayers to Adam, let him know this was going on.
It was near the dawn of their seventh day on earth that Adam and Eve heard the startling news of the proposal of their well-meaning but misguided mortals. And then, even while the passenger birds were swiftly winging to bring them to the temple, the midwayers, being able to do such things, transported Adam and Eve to the Father's temple. It was early on the morning of the seventh day, and from the mount of their so recent reception, that Adam held forth an explanation of the orders of divine sonship, and made clear to these earth minds that only the Father and those whom he designates may be worshipped. Adam made it plain that he would accept any honor and receive all respect, but worship never.
Okay. I want to bring something out in this paragraph that we skip right over a lot, and that is this. It says here, the midwayers, being able to do such things, transported Adam and Eve to the Father's temple. Did you know that? The midwayers can lift a human or a body and transport them anywhere they want.
Those are the loyal.
The loyal midwayers, right? Which is kind of interesting. You
That
know,
is really interesting.
you don't think about it. You skip right over this.
Kind of like levitation, just
Like a levitation, they move them there, right? And then Adam went on to explain the orders of divine sonship. What's he talking about? He's talking about all the levels of divine sons. And what are we talking about? The Most Highs, the Lananondex, the Verondadeks, the Melchizedeks, the material sons and daughters. That's the orders of sonship, right? He probably told them about the Daniels and, the paradise sonship too, right? So he explained this to them, and tried to make them understand that he would let them honor him in any way, but they cannot worship him in Eve. That's only allowed for the Father. Right?
Can I read something, Roger?
Yeah, sure.
About the midwayers, it just says midway creatures, offspring of the planetary biologic uplifters, or their immediate progeny, primary type, offspring of the modified ascendant mortal staffs of the planetary princes,
Right.
secondary type, ministering spirits working in association with the angelic host.
Right.
And then the angelic host, we're talking about, what was it? It was paper, was it the seraphim? Who are the angelic host? There's a list of 7 of them, correct?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's paper 26, I think.
Yeah, we went through all those orders of angels down through, those are all angelic hosts. And those are creations of the infinite spirit. Right?
Correct. So the angelic host, let me see if that's right.
The angelic, all the angelic hosts are children of the infinite spirit. And Gabriel.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I can understand how they felt that way. It was such, amazing contrast between the beings that lived there on the planet
Yeah.
and Adam and Eve. I mean, it was just,
Yeah, they
they
never
were
seen
overwhelmed with.
This is miraculous. to
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it probably would be miraculous to us. We
Yeah.
have to overcome that urge to worship them.
Yeah. Well, you think about it. If we had a UFO land in our front yard, and there's many people that would try to go worship them, if they were beings from another planet,
If they were kind.
if they were kind, yeah, because of lack of understanding, of what their mission would be. That's
So hey,
Well,
Roger.
people will worship anything that they think
That's
comes
right.
from God.
Anything they
The
don't
bones
understand.
of saints and rings and garbage, just the relics
Yeah.
that people worship. It's disgusting.
Or the
It is.
crucifix or the crosses,
Yeah.
sometimes.
So hey, Roger. In that paper 26, ministering spirits of the central universe, they started with Supernaphim, but it just says here that they're the highest order of the lowest group of the children of the infinite spirit, the angelic host.
Right.
But then they get, so it's not just the Supernaphim that are the angelic hosts, it's that list of 7 like Supernaphim, Seconaphim, Tertiaphim, Omniphim, Seraphim, Cherubim, Sanabim, and Midway creatures. That's the angelic host?
That's the angelic host, and each one is in charge of a different level of the universe too, Tim. Like for our local universe, we got Seconaphim, we got Seraphim, and we got guardian angels. Okay, but each level, as we go up, when we get to the constellation, there's another group. When we get to the Versa, there's a whole different group, and as you go up through all the way to paradise, there's different orders of angels that will minister to us. So, depending on what level it is the type of angel.
See, I was kind of confused because I thought the angelic hosts were just the Supernaphim,
No.
because it says children of the infinite spirit.
Yeah, and
But
even
it's that list of
midwayers,
7.
and even midwayers are considered part of the angelic host, even though they're not really angels. They're
Midway.
midway between human and angelic. So.
Yeah, because those are they were created by the material sons and daughters and the corporeal staff, correct?
Right.
The primary and secondary.
Right. Yeah, they're children of them. In other words, a midwayer is the child of Adam and Eve, or one of the Caligaster 100. The primary were Caligaster 100, the secondary were Adam and Eve. So, okay, let's go on. Who's it?
Diane.
Diane.
It was a momentous day, and just before noon, about the time of the arrival of the seraphic messenger bearing the Jerusalem acknowledgement of the installation of the world's rulers, Adam and Eve, moving apart from the throng, pointed to the Father's temple and said, "Go you now to the material emblem of the Father's invisible presence and bow down in worship of Him who made us all and who keeps us living. And let this act be the sincere pledge that you never will again be tempted to worship anyone but God." They all did as Adam directed. The material son and daughter stood alone on the mount with bowed heads while the people prostrated themselves about the temple.
So they fell down on the ground in front of the temple worshiping God, and Adam and Eve stood above them on the mount with bowed heads themselves. Right. So they straightened that little misunderstanding out pretty quick. And this was the origin of the Sabbath day tradition. Always in Eden, the seventh day was devoted to the noontime assembly at the temple. Long was the custom to devote this day to self-culture. The forenoon was devoted to physical improvement, the noontime to spiritual worship, the afternoon to mind culture, while the evening was spent in social rejoicing. This was never the law in Eden, but it was the custom as long as the Adamic administration held sway on the nation. So there comes your Sunday traditions, right?
So in Judaism, it's celebrated Friday evening. So that's pretty much what their Sabbath day, right? That's where it originated from.
Yeah.
And when they say that they all assembled, they're talking about everybody pretty much just in that group, or just everybody assembled?
Everybody in Eden assembled, right, at the Father's temple during that period of time. Okay, and it's 8:38, so I think I'm going to stop here and take up Adam's administration next time. Okay?
Great.
This is a great paper.
Yeah, and that's about half, and it's enough to digest for one night.
Yeah. Let's say a little prayer and then we'll quit for tonight. Tim, you haven't been with us a while. Would you like to close us in prayer now?
Sure. Let me see.
Okay.
Okay. Alright. Okay. Our perfect and righteous Heavenly Father, this day guide and direct our journey, sanctify our steps and coordinate our thoughts, ever lead us in the ways of eternal progress, fill us with wisdom to the fullness of power, and vitalize us with your infinite energy. Inspire us with the divine consciousness of the presence and guidance of the seraphic host. Guide us ever upward in the pathway of light. Justify us full in the day of the great judgment. Make us like yourselves in eternal glory, and receive us into your endless service on high. Not my will, but your will be done, Father.
Amen.
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 And thank you
Amen.
for joining us at home. Please come see us again. Video. I'm going to tell you all a couple things before you leave tonight. Here.
What a good prayer that is.
Oh, that's
It
good.
was.